This is the asset editor for my computer science NEA, which is a modular game engine. So the editor has many features, including the ability to import textures. So if we click on this, it should open the file explorer, where we can now select the texture that we want to import. So I import this texture, and I say that I'm saving it as my new texture. Click on import. You should see that in the asset editor, my new texture has now been created in the file explorer. You can also create different types of assets. For now, we can create shader assets and material assets. So if I click on this, it's going to say that we're now creating a shader asset. And if I now want to actually specify the name of it, I can open it in File Explorer to say my shader. So now saved as my shader and create. So this is the shader editor, and from here we can specify the source code files for our shaders. So if I set this as the vertex shader and this as the fragment shader, meaning that these two files are our shaders. So if we open the vertex shader, when it loads, we can see that this vertex shader is just a simple vertex shader which uses a view projection matrix and a model matrix to transform the vertices inputted from the vertex buffer to be in the correct position on screen based on the camera's projection and position. If we open the fragment shader, you can see that it uses a texture and a uniform buffer to get its parameters. So then you can also save this. So once it's saved, we should see my shader in the file browser. So that shows that it's been successfully saved. So from there we can now create a material. There's a filter here, so you can filter out asset types when you have longer lists. Typing in shader, it starts to filter out shaders, like anything that isn't a shader. Typing in material, it filters out any asset type that doesn't contain material in its name. So if I say that I want to create my new material and I save that, so but then it's not going to let me click create because the asset type hasn't actually been specified. So I have to click on material. Now it says material there to show that a material asset has been created, and I can actually click on the create button. So if I create that, so for now the screen is white, so that's just showing that that's OpenGL's way of kind of telling you that you don't actually have a valid shader bound yet. So when the screen just shows white, the shader that you have currently has not been properly bound. So if I actually assign a shader, if I assign the shader that we made previously, you can see that it now renders properly. But the viewport just shows a black cube, so but then we actually want to be able to have color in our material. So if you go back to our fragment shader, we can see that the parameters for the fragment shader are stored in a uniform buffer with the std140 layout. This layout just tells us how much padding should be between different variable types. But if we look at the actual structure of the buffer, we can see that we have a float, a 3-component vector, another 3-component vector, and another 3-component vector, and then finally a boolean value. So That's one float, three vectors, and one boolean. So to replicate this using the editor, we'll click on Edit Uniform Buffer Layout, then we add 5 slots. We set the variable types to be correct, so floats for the first one, then float 3 for the next 3 variables. And then boolean for the last one. You can name this one brightness color 1, color 2, color 3, and use vertex colors. The names don't have to match what's in your shader, but it's helpful for you to have names that are similar to what you've defined in your shader. So I click apply, and then if we look back at our fragment shader, you can see that we use a texture to actually map the colors. So that means we need to create a texture in the material editor. So we do this by clicking the edit texture slots button. We can add a texture slot. We only have one texture, so we only need one texture slot. So for this one, it actually needs to match the name. We call this texture and click apply. And then if we pick a texture that we've imported, if we pick this one, we should now be able to change the brightness to 1 and then select the color from here, and we can see that our changes here reflect in the viewport to show us that our material editor is actually working. And then make this pink, then I can make the last one white. So as you can see, everything that we've changed here has been reflected in the viewport, and we can still even change it, we can change the individual color components as well, be different colors. So we can now save this, and we should see my new material come up in the file explorer. See, so my new material is in the file explorer. So then hopefully, since we've saved all of this to the file explorer, we can now open these asset files when we next open the editor. So if I close the editor and then reopen it, and I go to open, and if I try to open the material, you can see that all of our settings are preserved, so the material has been saved successfully. Our shader is loaded properly from the right path, and our texture is loaded from the right path, and our uniform buffer layout remains correct as before, and the values in the uniform buffer are also correct. So the material has been completely saved correctly. And if we now try to open our shader file, well, we know that our shader file saved correctly because our material loaded properly, but just for argument's sake, if we open our shader file, you can see the shaders are correct as well. So that's the asset editor for my modular game engine so far. There's currently only support for editing materials and shaders and importing textures, but then this is just meant to act as a proof of concept. So I hope in the future to implement editors for more types of assets, and also to the way I've made it so that it should be easier for a game developer to implement their own editor if they have bespoke assets in their game. So yeah.